dramatic twist in Europe. Putin's allies are getting stabbed in the back. Viktor Orbán is facing a political breakdown. A harsh statement from a German politician delivered a final blow to the dictator. He was called an idiot to his face. And that's not all. A high-stakes scenario is unfolding, Operation Gamechanger. Could a staged assassination plot be used to portray Orbán as a victim and keep him in power? Meanwhile, Robert Fico is being accused of treason. The opposition has backed him into a corner. There's nowhere to run. It's time to be held accountable. Is this his final chapter or the start of an even bigger political storm? Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Pro-Kremlin politicians are facing the consequences. Robert Fico and Viktor Orbán are under heavy pressure. Orbán received a slap from German member of the European Parliament Moritz Kerner, who called the Hungarian Prime Minister an idiot to his face.
You are not a patriot. You are a useful idiot of Russia and China. You have turned Hungary into a banana republic. You have robbed your people and enriched your family and friends. You claim to stand for national sovereignty, yet you invite Chinese police to monitor people in your country. You say you want to stop migration, yet you allow Russian spies into our Schengen area and call it a national card. That's what you are doing.
Kerner also accused Orbán of corruption, lobbying for his inner circle, and creating conditions under which Hungary, in his view, has become one of the poorest and most corrupt countries in the European Union. The closer Hungary gets to elections, the more provocations emerge. Viktor Orbán is threatening to halt gas transit to Ukraine. The Hungarian Prime Minister stated that Ukraine will not receive gas until oil transit through the Druzhba pipeline is restored. Orbán is going all in and deliberately harming his own country. First, Orbán is exposing Hungary to lawsuits and the anger of international traders. Second, the European Commission will be forced to intervene, as such blatant violations of international law cannot be ignored. Third, a direct political ban on pumping fuel to Ukraine will cause significant losses for Hungary's gas transmission system operator, around €1 billion, which is a substantial amount for the country. However, there is no point in looking for economic logic in Orbán's actions. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the Hungarian Prime Minister risks losing power. He's desperately trying to stay in office.
3 weeks until the elections in Hungary. I think we may still hear that even bees are not allowed to cross the border.
And that's not even all. The most absurd and shocking twist has emerged from leaked documents of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. When Moscow realized that on April 12th Viktor Orbán could be decisively pushed out of power, they launched an operation codenamed Gamechanger. The plan staged an assassination attempt on Orbán to turn him into a sacred victim. Kremlin handlers even proposed replicating the Donald Trump scenario, hoping that the image of a wounded leader would make Hungarians forget economic hardships and rush to the polls to save their prime minister.
Such an incident will shift the perception of the campaign out of the rational realm of socio-economic questions into an emotional one, where the key themes will become state security and the stability and defense of the political system, the operatives wrote in a report prepared for the SVR's main unit for political influence operations, Directorate MS, or Active Measures Department.
And this scenario is already being actively pushed forward. A full team of GRU operatives has reportedly been deployed to Budapest, where under the leadership of Tigran Garibyan, they are producing waves of deepfakes targeting the opposition. Using artificial intelligence, they aim to discredit Peter Magyar and his allies from the TISA party. While Orbán presents himself as a defender of sovereignty, Russian operatives are said to be working behind the scenes, directing propaganda efforts from within Hungary itself.
There is growing panic in the ruling party, and I think they may take some not well-considered steps to hold on to power, said András Telkes, a Hungarian former deputy foreign intelligence chief. The Russians will do everything to keep Orbán in power. They consider Hungary as part of their sphere of influence.
Orbán's position appears increasingly fragile, and even dramatic scenarios may not be enough to save him. Many Hungarians see how their country is being pulled deeper into Moscow's orbit. April 12th could become the turning point when what critics call Putin's Trojan horse in Europe is finally brought down. The EU is showing less and less willingness to tolerate internal divisions, and Orban risks going down in history as a leader who put political alliances above national interests. Time is running out, and it is not on the dictator's side. Meanwhile, Slovak police have launched an investigation into Prime Minister Robert Fico. The case concerns suspicions of treason and other crimes related to the suspension of emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine. This was stated by the leader of the opposition party Freedom and Solidarity, Branislav Gröling. In a social media post, he noted that a month ago he filed a criminal complaint against Fico for treason and other offenses. Gröling claims that more than 13,000 people joined the complaint. According to the SAS leader, this makes it the largest criminal complaint in the country's history.
I am convinced that Fico is suspected of serious crimes. So I appreciate that both the prosecutor's office and the police are acting on this case and have not swept it under the rug.
Representatives of SAS filed several complaints with the General Prosecutor's Office at the end of February 2026. According to them, through his statements and actions aimed at stopping the supply of so-called emergency electricity to Ukraine, Fico may have committed a number of crimes: abuse of power, treason, inhuman treatment, breach of duty in managing others' property, and terrorism. Orban was digging a grave for Zelensky, but he may end up buried in it himself. The European Union is blocking funding for Hungary due to Budapest's obstruction of a 90 billion loan for Ukraine. More on Orban's latest setback ahead.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has finally gone too far. His friendship with the Kremlin and his openly anti-Ukrainian stance have backfired on Budapest. While Orbán was digging a grave for Zelensky, he ended up buried in it himself.
The Hungarian position here is simple. We are ready to support Ukraine when we get our oil, which they are blocking. Until then, Hungary will not support any decisions in favor of Ukraine here.
At the EU summit on March 19th, Viktor Orbán vetoed the granting of a 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine as military aid. EU leaders had agreed on such a loan back in December 2025, but later Hungary blocked the procedural decision.
We will not support Ukraine in this war, because this is not our war. We will not give money to the Ukrainians who are successfully extorting it from other European Union countries. We will not pay. We will not give money.
However, the short-sighted Orbán could not have imagined that this game can be played by two. In response to the blockade of aid to Ukraine, the European Commission also postponed the approval of a 16 billion credit plan for Hungary.
It is time to demonstrate our support for Ukraine.
Officially, the European Commission continues to review Hungary's loan application and will approve the plan when it is ready. However, as sources in diplomatic circles in Brussels have reported, this process could be delayed for as long as Hungary continues to obstruct the EU's efforts with Ukraine and maintains its friendship with the dictator Putin.
A man who created a mafia state in the heart of Europe, he has undoubtedly done exactly that. Virtually the standard of a mafia state that is modern Hungary. A book with a similar title has been written about him. That's a slightly different type. This type is much closer to someone like Vladimir Putin. The difference is that European politicians like Viktor Orbán thought that Vladimir Putin was just like them, a corrupt official, and therefore there was no reason to expect any serious wars from him. But he turned out to have grand ambitions. So Viktor Orbán doesn't have any serious grand ambitions except for a great Hungary, which he can't possibly achieve within the EU. No, he can't. And since that's the case, he's basically interested in securing for himself the role of leader of an alternative European Union.
But without European money, Orbán has nothing with which to build this alternative European Union. For many years, Hungary has essentially been living off handouts from neighboring countries. Meanwhile, the Kremlin's blood-stained money ends up exclusively in the Prime Minister's own pockets.
Money, money, money. That's it. That's the foundation of his cooperation with the Kremlin.
Against the backdrop of the upcoming parliamentary elections in Hungary, a refusal of financial assistance from the EU could drive the final nail into the coffin of Orbán and his party's inglorious political career. Europe tolerated Viktor as a necessary evil, a mediator between the West and the Kremlin. In 2026, when it became clear that reaching an agreement with Putin was impossible, Orbán turned into an eyesore that could and should be gotten rid of in the upcoming Hungarian elections.
Viktor Orbán, in addition, is that kind of bad guy who can be used to solve issues that others don't want to get their hands dirty with. This includes negotiations with Russia, with Ukraine regarding a potential peace, and addressing migration issues which are currently very acute in the European Union.
But the downsides of Orban's policies clearly outweigh the benefits. By trying to blackmail the EU and Ukraine, the Hungarian Prime Minister faced counter-pressure and the risk of financial isolation. His maneuvering between Brussels and the Kremlin is losing its meaning in the new reality, where Europe is no longer willing to make compromises or tolerate such dirty games, and is acting more decisively without regard for Budapest.
Belarus may soon attack Ukraine or could once again be used as a staging ground for a new offensive on Kyiv, according to Belarus Tomorrow. The decision on the possible offensive largely depends on the Kremlin rather than Lukashenko. Lukashenko himself is trying to avoid being directly drawn into the war as he fears internal instability and public backlash. Here are the details.
The Belarusian Batka, who also happens to be the main idol and sycophant of the Russian dictator, is once again in the spotlight.
We see what is happening around us, and today we need to update our defense. Well, maybe not our doctrine, but our defensive actions, so that everyone can see, and above all, so that our people can see, that we are ready to defend every inch of our land.
Lukashenko, following Putin's example, is establishing relations with Kim Jong-un. The leaders of North Korea and Belarus signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation during the first official visit to the DPRK. The potato father, as Kim Jong-un gave him a lavish welcome in Pyongyang. As part of the official ceremony, Lukashenko visited the Liberation Monument dedicated to Soviet soldiers and laid flowers at the request of the Kremlin dictator, as a sign of gratitude for Russia's assistance. Lukashenko, who has ruled Belarus for more than 30 years, remains the Kremlin's main ally. Since 2022, he has provided the country's territory as a staging ground for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And now he has also deployed Russian tactical nuclear weapons on his territory. In fact, Belarus has become a key instrument in Moscow's military plans. We
do not consider anyone our enemy or rival, but nevertheless, we are preparing for this war so that it does not happen.
The publication Belarus Tomorrow writes that Minsk may soon either join the attack on Ukraine or once again become a staging ground for a new offensive on Kyiv. The decision about a possible offensive mainly depends on the Kremlin, not on Lukashenko.
Such information should be classified as active operations in the information space aimed at shaping public opinion. Moreover, such operations should be attributed to the activities of Russian special services. The dissemination of this information is taking place against the backdrop of the Republic of Belarus moving closer to the United States. Moreover, the decision by the Trump administration to effectively bring the Republic of Belarus into the zone of military political influence of the Russian Federation.
Experts note that it is impossible to prepare a large-scale offensive without being noticed. For Ukrainian intelligence, the enemy simply won't succeed.
The Ukrainian intelligence community monitors any negative trends related to redeployment of the armed forces of the Republic of Belarus or the expansion of the Russian Federation's military presence on the territory of this state. And at this moment, it is not appropriate to talk about real threats from Belarus at this time.
Lukashenko is trying to demonstrate strength while at the same time pleasing Putin in such a way that nothing threatens his own power. He is not interested in directly involving Belarus in the Russian-Ukrainian war, because this could lead to extremely unpleasant strategic consequences for him, up to and including his removal from power. That is why he continues to curry favor with Putin, which he does with pleasure. We
share precisely the same vision and perspective. You are well aware of our thoughts, and we understand the fundamental Russian concepts. It truly represents one shared homeland. Kyiv, Rodbrist, Vladivostok, we have one homeland. Well, that's just how it happened, not by our will, that there are two states here. Came to be, and we must do everything so that our relations within this homeland are even closer than in a unitary state.
Lukashenko uses a well-known tactic, the so-called walking between the raindrops. That is, he tries to maneuver between the interests of the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, and the United States. He creates so-called centers of counterbalance. This allows him to solve his main issue, namely retaining his own power and accordingly the possibility of passing it on by inheritance.
At the same time, there is no other area where Russia and Belarus have such close cooperation as in the military sphere. In January, Belarus received a new batch of some of the most powerful Russian fighter jets, the Su-30 SM-2.
It is also worth noting the emergence of information about and the deployment of Oreshnik on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. Well, one main point is that Oreshnik is being deployed just 4, at most 6 kilometers from the Russian border. This, in fact, makes it possible to avoid the destruction of the launches as a result of retaliatory actions, either by the Ukrainian side or by NATO countries.
In fact, today the Belarusian defense industry has also shifted to a war footing, a move initiated by Lukashenko himself, out of fear of losing power in the country. At the same time, the potato Führer has long tried not to rely solely on Russia and is looking for other sources of support for himself just in case. If the situation goes downhill for Moscow. By the way, in the US, there have already been discussions for several months about the possibility of inviting Lukashenko to meet with Donald Trump at the White House.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and subscribe to stay informed about the main headlines. See you soon!